I'm Cassandra Mitchell, 32, and last Thursday I received a text message that shattered my world. "We've agreed you're no longer part of the family," my mother wrote. "Don't come to any future gatherings." 5 minutes later, my phone exploded with notifications as I discovered I'd been blocked by every family member, including my husband of 8 years. What I uncovered next would not only change my life forever, but would set in motion a revenge plan no one saw coming. Before I dive into how my entire family betrayed me and what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and if family drama stories like mine keep you on the edge of your seat, make sure to subscribe for new videos every week. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how this family thought they could throw me away until karma came knocking. Growing up in suburban Connecticut, I was raised to believe that family meant everything. My parents, Richard and Eleanor Mitchell, cultivated an image of the perfect American family: Sunday dinners, holiday traditions, and unwavering loyalty. Dad built a successful law firm, while Mom managed our social calendar with military precision. My younger brother Alex followed in Dad's footsteps, becoming a lawyer at the family firm. My sister Melissa married a doctor, had 2 perfect children, and maintained an Instagram feed that would make Martha Stewart jealous. Then there was me, the family's creative spirit. I built a modest career as a freelance photographer, focusing on wedding photography and family portraits. While they never said it directly, my career choice was viewed as a disappointment. "When will you get a real job?" was the constant refrain at family gatherings. Still, I found my person in James. He was kind, supportive, and seemed to love me despite my family's subtle disapproval. We married 8 years ago in a ceremony that my mother micromanaged down to the shade of white in my dress. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but James worked long hours at his financial consulting firm, and I traveled frequently for destination weddings. The distance sometimes created tension, but I believed we were solid. Even when I caught him texting someone late at night, I pushed away my suspicions. Family loyalty above all else, that's what I'd been taught. The first crack in our family's perfect veneer appeared 3 months ago. I arrived early to Sunday dinner and overheard my mother and Melissa in heated whispers. "She doesn't deserve to know," Mom hissed. "It would destroy everything we've built." When they noticed me, they plastered on smiles and changed the subject. I convinced myself it was nothing, probably planning a surprise for Dad's upcoming retirement. 2 weeks later, I found a receipt in James's jacket, an expensive restaurant I'd never been to, and a jewelry purchase from Tiffany's that I'd never received. Again, I swallowed my suspicions. James had been working late, frequently claimed to be traveling for business more often, and was increasingly protective of his phone. Classic signs that I willfully ignored. The third incident was harder to dismiss. At Alex's birthday dinner, I went to the bathroom and left my phone on the table. When I returned, everyone looked guilty, and the conversation abruptly shifted. Later, I noticed my photo gallery had been accessed. What were they looking for? What were they hiding from me? I began paying closer attention. Family members would stop talking when I entered rooms. James started taking calls outside our home. My mother scheduled family events that sometimes accidentally excluded me. "Oh, didn't James tell you we changed the date?" she'd say with manufactured innocence. Still, nothing prepared me for that text message. No warning, no explanation, no chance to defend myself against unspoken accusations. Just a cold dismissal from the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. What could I have possibly done to deserve complete excommunication? And why would my husband side with them against me? That night, after dozens of unanswered calls and texts, I sat alone in our house, a house that suddenly felt foreign and hostile. James hadn't come home, hadn't responded to my increasingly desperate messages. I poured myself a glass of wine, then another and another as I scrolled through family photos on my laptop, searching for clues I might have missed. Around midnight, an email notification appeared, a hotel booking confirmation forwarded to me by mistake. James had reserved a suite at the Four Seasons for the weekend. The reservation was for 2 people, James Mitchell and Melissa Mitchell. Melissa, my sister, my husband. The pieces began to fall into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't a recent development. The secretive conversations, the guilty looks, the jewelry that was never for me. How long had this been going on? And my parents, they knew. They all knew. And they had chosen to protect the betrayers rather than tell me the truth. I spent the night cycling between sobbing, rage, and numb disbelief. By dawn, something inside me had hardened. The family that raised me to value loyalty above all else had shown none toward me. They deserved to feel what I was feeling, the shock, the betrayal, the complete destruction of everything they thought was secure. As the sun rose on my new reality, I made a promise to myself. This wouldn't be a story where the wronged woman simply disappeared. My family had taught me about consequences my entire life. Now I would teach them about justice. The morning after receiving my mother's text, I began my investigation in earnest. With trembling hands but resolute determination, I called in sick to the photo shoot I had scheduled and focused on gathering evidence of what exactly I was being excluded from and why. Their complete radio silence only fueled my resolve. First, I checked our joint bank accounts. James had withdrawn $25,000 3 days earlier, nearly emptying our savings. A quick search through his desk revealed he had taken his passport and important documents. He wasn't just avoiding me, he was preparing to leave. But where and with whom? The hotel reservation with Melissa was just the beginning. Using the password I knew for James's laptop, I accessed his email. What I found confirmed my worst suspicions and revealed even darker truths. There were hundreds of exchanges between James and Melissa, dating back 2 years, passionate declarations, explicit photos, and detailed plans. The most recent emails discussed finally being free and starting fresh once she's out of the picture. That she was me and the picture they were removing me from was far larger than I initially understood. But the betrayal went deeper. My father had created a new trust for the family business, one that excluded me entirely but included James as a senior partner. My mother had helped Melissa and James find a new home in a neighboring town. My brother had drafted legal documents for the transfer of shared assets, effectively disinheriting me from everything my family had built. They weren't just supporting an affair, they were systematically erasing me from the family legacy. The most devastating discovery came from my mother's email. In an exchange with my father 3 months ago, she wrote, "Cassandra has always been the weak link. James and Melissa make more sense together. They share our values and ambition. This family needs strength, not her sentimentality. It's better to make a clean break now." My father's reply was equally cold. Agreed. We'll finalize the paperwork before telling her. Less messy that way, less messy. That's what my existence, my marriage, my place in the family had been reduced to, a mess to clean up. 25 years of birthday celebrations, holiday gatherings, and I love yous meant nothing when weighed against their precious family image and financial interests. I printed everything, every email, every document, every piece of evidence of their calculated betrayal. Then, I called a locksmith and changed the locks on our house. If James wanted to start fresh, he could do it without access to the home we had built together. Next, I contacted a lawyer, not from my father's circle, but a fierce divorce attorney known for taking down powerful men. I showed her everything I had uncovered and explained the situation. Her eyes widened as she reviewed the documents. "This is extraordinary," she said. "They've created a paper trail of conspiracy and fraud. We can use this." While legal proceedings would take time, I needed immediate financial security. I withdrew the remaining money from our personal account and opened a new one at a different bank. Then I took inventory of our valuable possessions, artwork we had collected, James's prized vintage watch collection, the jewelry he had given me over the years. Not to keep indefinitely, but as leverage until a fair settlement could be reached. That afternoon, I received a text from an unknown number. It was my cousin Sophia, my mother's niece. "I don't agree with what they're doing to you," she wrote. "There's a family meeting at your parents' house tonight. They're dividing your things." She included a screenshot of the group chat I'd been excluded from, confirming that my entire family would be gathering to dismantle what remained of my life. Sophia became my unexpected ally. She agreed to keep me informed about the family's movements and plans. "What they're doing is wrong," she said during our hushed phone call. "I always thought your family was perfect. Now I see it was all an act." Perfect. The word echoed in my mind. My family's obsession with appearing perfect had corrupted them completely. The irony wasn't lost on me in their quest to excise the imperfect element they had revealed themselves to be morally bankrupt. That night, while they met to divide my belongings like vultures, I drove to my sister's apartment. Using the spare key she didn't know I had, I entered and conducted my own investigation. In her bedroom closet, I found a small safe unlocked in her haste to attend the family meeting. Inside was a flash drive and a folder of documents. The flash drive contained videos, intimate moments between her and James in locations, including my own bed, my parents' vacation home, even my father's office. The timestamps showed this affair had been going on for nearly 3 years, almost half of my marriage. The documents were even more damning detailed plans for restructuring the family business, once I was removed financial projections, and a prenuptial agreement for Melissa and James drafted by my father and brother. As I sat in my sister's apartment, surrounded by evidence of their betrayal, something inside me shifted. The hurt was still there, but now it was overshadowed by cold, calculated fury. They had systematically planned my removal, treating me as an obstacle rather than a person they claimed to love. They had weaponized the very values they claimed to uphold: family loyalty, honesty, commitment. I gathered everything and left, but not before taking photos of her personal space, the contents of her medicine cabinet, her planner with all her appointments. Knowledge is power, and I needed every advantage. By midnight, I had a comprehensive understanding of what I was facing, not just a cheating husband and sister, but an entire family conspiracy. They thought they had planned everything perfectly. They believed I would quietly disappear, nursing my wounds in isolation, while they reconstructed their perfect family image without me. They had gravely underestimated the woman they had raised. I might have been the family's creative spirit, but I had inherited my father's strategic mind and my mother's attention to detail. They had taught me the importance of family now. I would teach them the cost of betrayal. For the next week, I maintained complete silence. No responses to the few tentative messages that came through from extended family members fishing for information. No social media activity. No contact with friends or colleagues beyond the necessary rescheduling of photo shoots. To the outside world and to my family, I had vanished, presumably to lick my wounds and accept my fate. This strategic retreat served 2 purposes. First, it gave me time to plan meticulously. Second, it created a false sense of security for those who had betrayed me. Let them think I was destroyed. Let them believe they had won. During this time, I moved into a small, furnished apartment, paid for in cash through a friend of a friend. I used a burner phone for essential communications and kept my actual phone turned off, except for brief periods to collect evidence. My lawyer advised documenting everything while moving assets to protected accounts. "They've made serious mistakes," she assured me, "but we need to be perfect in our response." Perfect. There was that word again. My lawyer filed initial divorce papers, but requested they be sealed temporarily, a courtesy the judge granted, given the unusual circumstances. We also filed emergency motions to freeze certain assets, including the house and our investment accounts, preventing James from liquidating anything further. Meanwhile, I methodically built my case. With Sophia's help, I learned that James had moved in with Melissa, that my parents were hosting dinners to introduce the new couple to their social circle, and that my father had already begun transferring clients to James at the firm. They were rewriting history, casting me as a phantom that had barely existed. Through careful research, I discovered something my father had overlooked. 3 years ago, when the family law firm was restructured as a limited liability company, I had signed documents as a silent partner, a tax strategy my father had implemented. While I had never participated in the business, I legally owned 15% of the firm. This oversight would become crucial. I also found that the house James and I owned had been purchased primarily with money I had inherited from my grandmother, funds that predated our marriage and should have been protected as separate property. Yet James had been planning to claim half its value. 10 days into my self-imposed exile, I received an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Reynolds, my parents' housekeeper of 20 years, appeared at my temporary apartment with a box of my childhood possessions and tears in her eyes. "They told me to donate these," she said, placing the box on my kitchen counter. Inside were photo albums, academic awards, and mementos my mother had supposedly treasured. "I couldn't bear to throw away your memories, Miss Cassandra." Mrs. Reynolds had more to offer than just rescued keepsakes. As the invisible presence in my parents' home, she had overheard conversations never meant for other ears. She revealed that my mother had been orchestrating the relationship between James and Melissa for years, believing they were better suited. She confirmed that my father had promised James partnership in exchange for his discretion during the transition. Most valuably, she had something they didn't know existed: recordings. "Your father has cameras in his home office," she explained. "They record automatically when motion is detected. I clean the system every month and back up the files." She handed me a small hard drive. "Last backup was 2 weeks ago. I think you should have it." The recordings were damning. There was my father explicitly discussing how to remove me from the family trust while minimizing tax implications. There was my mother coaching Melissa on how to handle potential social backlash. There was my brother suggesting they claim I had mental health issues if I fought back legally. And there was James calmly discussing their future plans while sitting in my father's chair like he already owned it. Their betrayal was complete, calculated, and cold-blooded. But now I had everything I needed. 2 weeks after my mother's text, I was ready to re-emerge, not as the victim they expected, but as the adversary they deserved. My lawyer had prepared comprehensive legal filings. My financial advisor had secured my remaining assets. And I had mapped out every vulnerability in their carefully constructed new reality. The family that had discarded me was about to discover I had never been the weakest link. I had merely been the most underestimated. On day 15 of my exile, I sent a group text to everyone who had blocked me. "I know everything. Meeting at Morton's Steakhouse private room tomorrow at 7 p.m. Come alone or I send everything public. This is your only chance for a private resolution." Then I prepared for the confrontation that would either destroy my family completely or force them to face the monster they had created. The private dining room at Morton's Steakhouse was set exactly as I had specified: 1 chair at the head of the table, 5 chairs along the sides. A projection screen stood ready at the far end connected to my laptop. My lawyer waited in the adjacent room prepared to enter if necessary. The voice recorder app on my phone was already running. I arrived 30 minutes early, dressed in a black suit that I'd once worn to court to photograph a high-profile wedding. My hair was pulled back severely, my makeup minimal but flawless. I wanted to look formidable, unbroken. The woman who greeted them would not be the emotional, creative daughter they thought they knew. Tonight they would meet the woman they had created. They arrived together, of course, a unified front. My father led the procession, his silver hair and tailored suit projecting the authority he'd wielded my entire life. My mother followed her face, a careful mask of neutral concern. Alex came next already in lawyer mode, a portfolio tucked under his arm. And then James and Melissa holding hands with the entitled comfort of a long-established couple, rather than the furtive secrecy of adulterers. Cassandra, my father nodded coldly as they took their seats. I hope this meeting will be brief. We've made our decision and dramatic scenes won't change anything. I remained standing, my hands resting lightly on the back of my chair. Thank you all for coming, I said, my voice steady and professional as if addressing clients rather than the people who had raised and then betrayed me. I've asked you here because I believe in efficiency. What I have to say and show you can be delivered once to everyone involved. If this is about the divorce James began, our lawyers should. This is about much more than divorce, I interrupted, finally taking my seat. This is about consequences. I opened my laptop and began the presentation I had prepared. First, I showed them screenshots of the emails between James and Melissa dating back 3 years. My mother flinched at the explicit content, though she'd clearly known about the relationship. Next came the financial documents, the transfers, the trust modifications, the planned division of assets. Illegal, I noted, calmly pointing to specific transactions. Fraudulent, I continued highlighting my father's manipulation of the family business. Actionable, I concluded, showing the consultation notes from 3 separate law firms confirming I had grounds for significant legal claims. My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "You're bluffing," he spat. "You don't have the resources or the backbone to fight us." In response, I played a short clip from the recordings. Mrs. Reynolds had provided my father explicitly discussing how to remove me from the family trust while ensuring James would benefit. I have hours of similar recordings, I informed them. Mrs. Reynolds has been quite helpful, my mother gasped. That's invasion of privacy. Those recordings are illegal. Actually, I corrected. Connecticut is a one-party consent state for recordings made in places without an expectation of privacy. Dad's home office, where he conducts business, doesn't qualify. But I'm not here to debate legalities. I'm here to outline options. I clicked to the next slide, a detailed breakdown of what a public legal battle would cost them. Not just financially, though. Those numbers were staggering, but reputationally. My father's law firm serving wealthy clients who valued discretion. My mother's position on 3 charity boards. Alex's budding political ambitions. Melissa's perfect social media presence. James's career built on trust and confidentiality. Option 1, I said clicking forward is war. I file the lawsuits my attorneys have prepared. I release the evidence to selected journalists who owe me favors from my years photographing their family events. I ensure that when anyone Googles any of your names for the next decade, this story is what they find. The room was silent now, the initial confidence drained from their postures. Option 2, I continued revealing my proposed settlement terms. I receive my fair share of the family assets, the 15% of the firm that's legally mine, full ownership of the house James and I shared, and a financial settlement that acknowledges the fraud attempted. In exchange, I sign NDAs and disappear from your lives as you so clearly want. My father leaned forward, his lawyer's mind already calculating. And if we refuse? In answer, I played another recording one of James and Melissa laughing about how they'd used my mother's birthday celebration as cover for a weekend together while I was working at a destination wedding. I have enough material to ensure that none of you ever attends another social event in Connecticut without whispers following you, I said quietly. The perfect Mitchell family will become a cautionary tale. James stood abruptly. This is blackmail. No, I corrected him. This is accountability. You all conspired to betray me not just emotionally, but financially. You planned to strip me of my rightful assets and family connections. Did you really think I would just accept that and disappear? For the first time, uncertainty flickered across my mother's face. Cassandra, she began, her voice softening into the maternal tone she'd used when I was a child. Families sometimes make difficult decisions for the greater good. We thought a clean break would be kinder in the long run. Kinder, I echoed, allowing emotion to color my voice for the first time. You told me I was no longer family via text message. After 32 years of being your daughter, after 8 years of marriage, you decided I was disposable, and you expected me to accept that without question. I turned to each of them in turn. Dad, you taught me that respect must be earned and maintained. Mom, you insisted that family stands together against outside threats. Alex, you claimed to value justice above all. Melissa, you were my sister, my first friend. And James, you promised before God and witnesses to stand by me until death. I closed my laptop. Each of you betrayed not just me, but the very values you claimed to uphold. And now you face a choice. Fight me and lose everything, or acknowledge what you've done and pay a fair price for your freedom from me. The silence stretched heavy with recalculation and dawning realization. They had never expected this version of me, strategic, thorough, uncompromising. They had expected tears, pleas, perhaps a scene in public that would justify their portrayal of me as unstable. Instead, they faced a woman who had learned from their betrayal and turned their tactics against them. I stood up. My lawyer has the paperwork ready. You have 24 hours to decide. After that, I file everything and the option for a private resolution disappears. I gathered my belongings, preparing to leave them to their discussion. Wait, my father said, his voice lacking its usual authority. What happened to you, Cassandra? This isn't like you. I paused at the door and looked back at the family that had shaped and then shattered me. You're right. The Cassandra you knew would have forgiven you, would have blamed herself, would have disappeared to protect your happiness. But she died the moment she read Mom's text message. The woman standing before you now is someone else entirely, someone you created. When you taught me that family means nothing when interests conflict. Before leaving, I left them with one final thought. You wanted me gone from the family. Congratulations, your wish came true. But be careful what you wish for. Sometimes what replaces what you've lost is far more dangerous than what you discarded. And as I closed the door behind me, I felt a strange sense of peace amid the turmoil. Whatever they decided, I had already won the most important battle. I had refused to be the victim in their story. You've been with me through the revelation of my family's betrayal and just witnessed this intense confrontation. I'm truly grateful for your support during this emotional journey. Before we continue to see how my family responds to my ultimatum, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who betrayed your trust? Drop a comment below about how you handled it. And if you're finding this story of family drama and revenge compelling, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories of resilience and justice. Now let's continue and see what happens next. The 24 hours following our confrontation at Morton's passed with excruciating slowness. I returned to my temporary apartment and waited my phone beside me, the business card of a journalist friend in my hand, my backup plan if they called my bluff. I didn't sleep that night, rehearsing both possible outcomes in my mind. Either way, I had decided I would emerge stronger than before. At hour 22, my lawyer called. They've agreed to negotiate, she said, the surprise evident in her voice. Your father's attorney contacted me directly. They want to meet tomorrow to discuss terms. I felt a curious emptiness where triumph should have been. All of them agreed. Apparently, there was significant disagreement among them after your presentation. Your brother Alex was particularly vocal about the legal ramifications. But yes, they've agreed to settlement talks rather than litigation. The negotiations took place in the sterile conference room of a neutral law firm. This time, each family member brought their own attorney, a sign that the unified front had fractured. My father looked ashen, the confidence drained from his posture. My mother refused to meet my eyes. Melissa's perfect makeup couldn't hide the evidence of recent tears. James just looked defeated. Only Alex appeared somewhat composed, though the tightness around his eyes betrayed his stress. As we took our seats, I realized he was afraid not just of the legal consequences, but of me, of what I had become. Good. The negotiations were brutal and extended over 3 days. My father fought hardest over the firm, arguing that my 15% stake should be bought out rather than maintained. I conceded this point in exchange for a significantly higher valuation than he proposed. The house was less contentious. James relinquished his claim entirely when my lawyer presented evidence that the down payment had come from my separate inheritance. The most difficult negotiations concerned the family trust. My parents had indeed restructured it to exclude me entirely, but the timing and circumstances made the changes legally vulnerable. After hours of debate, we reached a compromise. I would receive a lump sum payment representing what would have been my share in exchange for relinquishing future claims. Throughout the proceedings, personal apologies were noticeably absent. This was strictly business, now the severance of financial ties to accompany the severing of familial bonds. The only unexpected moment of emotion came on the final day when Melissa suddenly addressed me directly during a break. "I never meant for it to happen this way," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. James and I connected and then it spiraled and... Save it? I interrupted, my tone measured. "This isn't about forgiveness. This is about resolution." Her face crumpled. "Will you ever tell anyone about us? About what happened? I studied my sister, the woman who had played with me as a child, who had been my maid of honor, who had slept with my husband for years while smiling to my face." "That depends entirely on all of you," I replied. "Uphold your end of our agreement and your secrets remain safe. Break faith again and I'll have nothing left to lose." By the end of the 3rd day, we had reached a comprehensive settlement. I would receive approximately $2.3 million in combined assets and payments, far less than what the family was worth, but enough to start a new life entirely on my own terms. More importantly, I had secured my freedom from them without sacrificing my dignity or accepting their narrative. The final documents were signed in silence. As pens scratched on paper, I realized that this truly was the end of the Mitchell family as I had known it. Whatever relationships existed between the remaining members would be forever altered by what had transpired. When the last signature was complete, my father stood and extended his hand to me, a businessman, concluding a transaction, not a father saying goodbye to his daughter. I ignored his hand. "I have one final condition that isn't in the paperwork," I said. My lawyer looked alarmed. We had finalized everything. But this wasn't a legal demand. I want to know why I said looking at each of them in turn. Not the affair, not the financial maneuvering. Why the text message? Why the complete excommunication without even a conversation? After 32 years, didn't I deserve at least that much? The question hung in the air, uncomfortable and unavoidable. Finally, my mother spoke. "It was my decision," she admitted, her voice thin but steady. I thought a clean break would be easier. "For everyone? Easier," I repeated. "You mean easier for you? Easier than facing me? Easier than acknowledging what you were allowing to happen?" She didn't deny it. In her silence lay the confirmation of everything I had come to understand about my family appearances mattered more than substance, convenience more than integrity, self-interest more than love. "Thank you for your honesty," I said, gathering my copy of the signed documents. "I won't be contacting any of you again. I suggest you extend me the same courtesy." I walked out of that conference room a different person than I had been 3 weeks earlier. The Cassandra who had lived for family approval, who had accepted subtle diminishment as the price of belonging, was gone. In her place stood a woman who had faced betrayal and emerged not just surviving, but dictating terms. The settlement money sat untouched in my account for 2 months while I contemplated my next steps. I had the freedom to go anywhere, do anything. The initial shock and pain had given way to something unexpected possibility. Without the constant subtle pressure to conform to my family's expectations, I could reimagine myself entirely. During this time, I received occasional updates from Sophia. The family narrative about my departure had shifted several times. First, I was having emotional difficulties, then I had chosen to pursue opportunities elsewhere, and finally, they simply stopped mentioning me at all. James and Melissa's relationship had become official, but was reportedly strained. My father had aged visibly. My mother had withdrawn from 2 of her charity boards. I took no pleasure in their struggles, but neither did I feel responsible for them. They had made their choices as I was now making mine. 3 months after the settlement, I made my decision. I sold most of my possessions, keeping only my camera equipment and personal mementos. I purchased a ticket to Seattle, a city where I knew no one, where no one knew the Mitchell family, where I could build something authentic from the ground up. Before leaving Connecticut, I had one final task. I drove to my childhood home when I knew my parents would be out. Mrs. Reynolds let me in, breaking into a wide smile at the sight of me. "You look well, Miss Cassandra," she said, ushering me into the kitchen, where she had made tea just as she had when I was a girl coming home from school. "I'm getting there," I admitted. "I wanted to thank you for the recordings, for saving my things, for being honest when no one else was." She patted my hand. "Some families are bound by blood, but broken by character. Some families are chosen and stronger for it." I left her with a letter containing a generous check enough for the retirement she had long deserved, but my parents had never provided for. It wasn't charity, it was recognition of the one person in that household who had demonstrated true family loyalty. As I drove away from the neighborhood where I had grown up, I felt no urge to look back. The rearview mirror showed only road already traveled, and my focus was firmly on what lay ahead. The family that had discarded me had inadvertently given me the greatest gift: liberation from the constraints of their expectations and the freedom to define family on my own terms. Seattle welcomed me with rain-washed streets and unfamiliar horizons. I rented a small apartment overlooking Puget Sound and set up a modest photography studio. Starting over at 32 wasn't easy, but it carried none of the fear I might have expected. I had already faced the worst betrayal imaginable and survived. What was a new city compared to that? Slowly, I built a new life. My photography business attracted clients who valued my ability to capture authentic moments rather than staged perfection. I made friends who knew nothing of my past, people who accepted me as I was, not as an extension of a family name. And sometimes in quiet moments, watching the sun set over the Sound, I would think about the text message that had changed everything. "We've agreed you're no longer part of the family," my mother had written. In trying to punish me, they had instead set me free. 1 year after settling in Seattle, my new life had taken shape. My photography business had found a niche, specializing in candid event photography, with an emphasis on capturing genuine emotions rather than posed perfection. An intentional departure from the carefully curated family portraits I once created. I had made real friends, joined a hiking group, and even gone on a few dates, though I remained cautious about serious relationships. The Mitchell family drama felt increasingly distant, like a story that had happened to someone else. I rarely checked social media for updates on their lives, and had asked Sophia to contact me only if something truly significant occurred. The clean break had been healing. Then, on a rainy Tuesday morning, an email arrived from an unfamiliar address with the subject line, "You deserve to know the whole truth." The sender was Robert Kellerman, my father's former law partner, who had retired 3 years earlier. I remembered him as a quiet, principled man who had always treated me with unusual kindness at firm events. Cassandra, the email began, I recently learned of the circumstances of your separation from the Mitchell family. While I've been retired and living in Arizona, news eventually reached me through mutual connections. What happened to you was unconscionable, but I fear you may not know the complete story. There are things about your family, about your place in it, that were hidden from you your entire life. I'm not getting any younger, and some truths shouldn't die with old men. If you're willing to hear it, I believe you deserve the full picture. I'll be in Seattle next week for my granddaughter's college graduation. My hand trembled as I read his contact information and the name of his hotel. What more could there possibly be to know? What secrets remained that could matter now after everything I debated ignoring the message? My life was finally stabilizing. Did I really want to invite chaos back in? But the question nagged at me. What truth had been hidden my entire life? After 3 days of internal debate, I wrote back agreeing to meet him. We met in a quiet corner of his hotel's restaurant. Robert had aged considerably since I'd last seen him. His once imposing frame now slightly stooped, his hair thinner, but his eyes still sharp with intelligence. "Thank you for meeting me, Cassandra," he said after we exchanged awkward greetings. "I wasn't sure you would. Curiosity won out," I admitted. "What is this truth you think I need to know?" Robert took a deep breath. "It concerns your birth and Richard's behavior afterward. Richard, my father, not your father." The distinction in his language wasn't lost on me. 33 years ago, he continued, "Your mother had an affair. It was brief, but consequential." The man was a client of the firm, a creative type, a photographer with talent, but financial troubles. He paused, watching my expression carefully. 9 months later, you were born. The implication hung in the air between us. Are you saying Richard isn't my biological father? The words felt strange in my mouth, disconnected from reality. Richard discovered the affair shortly before your birth. He had a paternity test done secretly when you were an infant. The results confirmed his suspicions. Robert's voice softened. But publicly, he claimed you as his own. Few people knew the truth, Eleanor, myself, and later, when they were old enough to understand such things, Alex and Melissa. The restaurant seemed to tilt around me as pieces locked into horrifying place. My father's perpetual disappointment, my mother's alternating overprotectiveness, and emotional distance, my siblings' casual cruelty masked as teasing. The family jokes about my creative spirit being unlike the practical Mitchell temperament. They hadn't just rejected me, they had never truly accepted me to begin with. So, my entire life was a lie, I said flatly. Why maintain the pretense for 32 years, only to discard me now? Robert looked genuinely sorrowful. Richard is complicated. He values appearance and legacy above all else. Having another man's child raising his name would have been intolerable, except for the scandal divorce would have caused. So he compromised you would be a Mitchell in name, but never truly part of the inner circle. And my biological father, who was he? Daniel Winters, a talented man but unstable. He moved to the West Coast shortly after your birth. Your mother cut all contact with him as part of her agreement with Richard. He passed away about 15 years ago. The name meant nothing to me, but the revelation explained everything. Did James know? Is that why it was so easy for him to betray me? Because I wasn't really family. Robert nodded grimly. Richard told him early in your relationship. I believe it was his way of giving permission, in a sense. Making clear that loyalty to you was optional. Anger surged through me, but beneath it was something unexpected relief. The question that had haunted me since receiving my mother's text, how could they discard me so completely, finally had an answer. I had never truly been theirs to begin with. I was a compromise, a concession to appearances, a character in their family performance. Why tell me now, I asked. Because you deserved better than what they gave you, Robert said simply. And because I knew Daniel Winters. He was a good man beneath his struggles, creative, compassionate, authentic, in a way Richard never understood. You have his eyes, his talent for seeing beauty in unexpected places. Those parts of yourself you've always felt were wrong or insufficient, they're not. They're just not Mitchell traits. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a small envelope. These belonged to him. A few photographs. He took some notes about his philosophy of photography. I kept them all these years thinking someday. He trailed off, sliding the envelope across the table. Inside were 3 stunning black and white photographs, street scenes capturing moments of startling emotional intensity, and several pages of handwritten notes about light composition and the ethics of documentary photography. The handwriting was eerily similar to my own. "Thank you," I whispered, genuinely moved by this connection to a man I would never know, but whose blood and talent ran in my veins. "There's one more thing," Robert said hesitantly. "Daniel has had a sister, your aunt. She lives in Portland. She doesn't know about you, but she might welcome the connection. Her information is in there as well." As I left the restaurant clutching the envelope with its precious contents, I felt strangely unburdened. The final piece of the puzzle had clicked into place. The family that had rejected me had never truly been mine, and now I was free to find or create my own. 2 weeks later, after careful consideration, I drove to Portland and met Janet Winters, my biological father's sister. She took one look at me standing on her doorstep and burst into tears. "You have Danny's eyes," she said, ushering me inside. "I knew it the moment I saw you." Janet was everything the Mitchells were not: warm, artistic, emotionally expressive. Her house was filled with books, art, and photographs, including several by my father. She had albums of family photos, stories about his childhood, even a collection of his cameras that she had preserved after his death. "He would have loved knowing about you," she told me, as we looked through the albums. Family meant everything to Danny, real family, not the kind that exists for appearance's sake. Through Janet, I discovered an entire branch of relatives I never knew existed. Cousins with creative careers, an uncle who wrote poetry, a family history rich with artists and dreamers. People who might understand the parts of myself I had always been taught to downplay or hide. People who might accept me without conditions or expectations. 6 months after meeting Janet, I legally changed my name. Cassandra Mitchell became Cassandra Winters, reclaiming the heritage that had been denied me and shedding the last visible connection to the family that had never truly claimed me. The final chapter of this story came a year later when an invitation arrived at my studio in Seattle, Melissa and James's wedding announcement. It had been forwarded from my old address, likely sent out of obligation or appearances rather than any genuine desire for my presence. The perfect Mitchell family completing its restructuring, the narrative revised to exclude the inconvenient daughter the pretense maintained. I sent no gift, no response, no acknowledgement of any kind. Instead, I booked a trip to Bali for that weekend, a photography expedition I had long dreamed of undertaking. As they exchanged vows, I would be capturing sunrise over ancient temples, creating beauty from my own vision, living authentically in the light rather than performing perfection in the shadows. Sometimes family is not what we're born into, but what we choose to create. Sometimes betrayal, painful as it is, reveals truths we need to see. Sometimes the end of one story is simply the necessary beginning of another better one. The text message that once shattered my world, "We've agreed you're no longer part of the family," has been reframed in my mind. It wasn't an ending, but a liberation. Not a rejection, but a redirection toward my true heritage, my authentic self, my chosen family. They thought they were punishing me. Instead, they set me free. Today marks 3 years since I received that life-changing text message from my mother. 3 years of rebuilding, discovering, and ultimately thriving in ways I never could have imagined while living under the Mitchell family shadow. My photography studio in Seattle has flourished, specializing in capturing authentic moments and real emotions rather than staged perfection. Last month, I was featured in a prominent art magazine for my documentary series on chosen families, people who have found belonging not through blood, but through genuine connection and acceptance. Janet and I have grown close with regular visits between Seattle and Portland. Through her, I've connected with an extended family that celebrates rather than criticizes my creative spirit. Last Christmas, surrounded by Winter's relatives who genuinely wanted to know me, I finally understood what family should feel like. Warm, accepting, real. I've started dating again cautiously at first, but with increasing openness. My new partner knows my full story and supports my journey without judgment. Trust comes slowly after betrayal, but it does come. As for the Mitchells, Sophia occasionally sends updates though. I've asked her to keep them minimal. James and Melissa's marriage reportedly faces challenges built as it was on betrayal. Perhaps it was inevitable. My father suffered a minor heart attack last year, prompting him to step back from the firm. My mother continues her social obligations with fewer genuine friends than before. The perfect facade shows cracks that cannot be hidden. I feel no satisfaction in their struggles, no vindictive joy. That part of my story is closed now. What they did was unforgivable, but holding on to anger would only keep me tethered to them. My revenge wasn't in seeing them suffer, but in refusing to be destroyed by their rejection, in building a life so authentic and fulfilling that their absence became irrelevant. The ultimate irony is that in trying to remove what they saw as an imperfection in their family portrait, they lost the only person who ever truly valued family for more than appearances. In attempting to erase me, they instead erased the possibility of their own redemption. The truth I've learned through this journey is both painful and liberating. Sometimes the family we're given fails us completely. Sometimes betrayal comes from those who should love us most. But these failures don't define us. We can choose our own definitions of family loyalty and belonging. We can build connections based on authenticity rather than obligation. That text message, "We've agreed you're no longer part of the family," was intended to break me. Instead, it became the first line of a new story. My story. On my terms. I hope sharing this journey helps someone else facing betrayal or rejection. Remember, you are not defined by those who fail to see your worth. You are not diminished by others' inability to love authentically, and sometimes what feels like an ending is actually the beginning you've been waiting for. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear about your own experiences with family dynamics and how you've handled challenging situations. Have you ever had to redefine what family means to you? Drop a comment below and let me know. And if you found value in my story, please hit that like button, subscribe to my channel for more authentic life stories, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that surviving betrayal is possible. Thank you for being part of my chosen family here on this platform. Your support means more than you know.